similar things, right? You're relying a lot of the time on questing adventurer. Evil Miscreant is, you know, the unsung hero of the early mid-game a lot of the time, just in terms of how much wide board development it can afford you. But I've got to be honest, I still do think I favor the non-secret version a little bit more in the matchup. We shall have to see, though. Bequiet has himself already a respectable hand, even if you're just keeping the Pharaoh Cat here. It's enough to be moving on with in the early game.
Yeah, and Xiaobai is going to have to plan what he wants to do reasonably carefully. I know it's a bit of a meme because quite clearly he can have a couple of strong early turns, but this hand needs work, or you just end up with nothing happening and you die really fast.
Yeah, it's not abundantly clear how you're supposed to sequence this hand, because at first glance, obviously I'm thinking Coin Miscreant, Backstab Miscreant looks like a pretty strong couple of turns, which it is. It's perfectly reasonable. But one of the things you hear from players as one of the first tricks that you learn with the deck is you're not really supposed to go Coin Miscreant as often as you would think. Very often you're supposed to do it on turn 3 so that you can immediately play Witchy Lackey or Taunt Lackey. So it may be a little bit difficult for Xiaobai to sequence these turns, but it is not difficult at all for Bequiet to just slam down this Hanar with Prep Secret as well. This is tempo, it's disruption, it's card generation, everything you could ask for in a Hearthstone turn.
Yeah, and it might actually force Xiaobai's hand to just try and do something immediately. Whereas originally when he saw his hand, he'd be working out how fast do I need to go. I mean, the answer is now very fast. You are already facing a borderline emergency situation here, because those secrets are just going to get ridiculous amounts of tempo and value, the two things you need both of in this matchup.
And so how does he go about it? Because if he goes Coin Miscreant, every one of the secrets is actually kind of bad for him. If it's Ambush, it just dies straight away. If it's Plagiarize, he's given his opponent Coin and Miscreant. If it's Dirty Tricks, then which is the most likely as the only secret that has 2 copies in the list, then he's just given his opponent more cards. It's all pretty rough altogether. And so in the end, he's Shadow Stepping here, which guarantees him, or at least makes it much more likely, that he will be able to clear off the Hanar next turn with Miscreant and Rush.
Yeah, but with Redemption already being found, Bequiet is looking to just protect it as much as possible. And also making this big wide board. This is going to be so irritating, and Xiaobai is going to have to guess right here, otherwise he could just die in 2 or 3 turns.
Yeah, the problem is there's a lot that can go wrong with Backstab and then Rush your Miscreant, because Never Surrender would, of course, buff the health, which means it's no longer a possibility.
There's Noble Sacrifice.
Noble Sacrifice, yeah. Resurrection as well, or Redemption, sorry. There's a lot that can go wrong here. Kobold Lackey does, thankfully for him, deal with all of those. So he is guaranteed now to be able to clear off the Hanar, if nothing else, on this turn.
Yep, and now he is going to start to be able to turn the tide a little bit. Bequiet's hand all of a sudden looks that little bit slower with the Hanar being mopped up. And it makes it a lot easier to plan when you haven't got to face any secret in the game. It is just so irritating to have to play around. And turn after turn, when the Hanars stick, you're so likely, no matter who you are, to just eventually make a mistake. Like a sequencing mistake.
Kind of looks like he's gearing up towards Faceless Lackey and then, I guess, stepping the Kobold Lackey here. Which I can obviously see the merit behind, because you get more immediate tempo. You're potentially able to clear off the poison, but I don't know, just being able to go Faceless Lackey plus Miscreant next turn felt pretty good as well.
I'm just going to make that noise every time I see Foxy Fraud throughout this tournament. It's such a ridiculously good card right now.
It really is.
I say right now, I don't know what's going to change, and I don't see why it would not continue to be a ridiculously good card way into the future, to be honest. Just allows you to guess at your next turn, like secret passages and things, without having to worry.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that in the reviews for Madness at the Dark Moon Fair, people kind of initially glossed over it because they were like, it's just a 3-2. There's a whole lot of those printed in Hearthstone that tend not to be all too good, but then quickly realized, wait a second, this is definitely a 5 out of 5, as most people in the end gave it.
Yeah, it's a 0 mana 3-2.
Exactly, yeah.
That's just gigantic. Sounds like a druid card.
Well, rush to just buff the attack and then play Miscreant is, of course, a possibility. But taking it a little bit slower in the end is a very reasonable way to go about it. Just clearing off the poisonous. It's all playing on the back foot, which is pretty brutal, but as long as Bequiet doesn't have a strong follow-up, this is still very winnable for Xiaobai.
Yeah, and this exact thing we're watching now is current Hearthstone in a nutshell. When you're talking about lineups targeting things earlier, the reason that people aren't particularly doing that, they're just sort of having a deck they try to beat, is exactly this. Like, you can't just target decks anymore. Every deck has this capability of infinite value, infinite tempo, almost infinite tempo.
Yeah.
No matter what the class, it's just that Rogue really exemplifies it. So the reason we're not seeing many targeted lineups, or at least not hard targets like the one you talked about, is because every deck has these crazy, crazy turns.
Very welcome draw, though, you'd have to imagine, for Xiaobai. He, actually, I guess with the 3-1 weapon, I'd kind of forgotten that it was buffed. Maybe you can go about it in a different way, but I don't know, I'm kind of looking at World Kick of this, and then you can potentially even just Goblin Lackey to rush it in if you don't want to tank the 6 damage as well.
Not a bad pickup there, actually, the ringleader at the current board state. A couple of 2-2s or 2-2 and a 2-1, you know. Not exactly amazing, but might be very welcome right now. Because he doesn't know that there's an explosive trap in the hand of Bequiet.
Oh, you just can't tank the 6 damage here, right? It's nowhere near worth it to keep a World Kick alive. Like, it still just dies on board. You have to get it in.
And it's not 6 damage either. It could be 1 million damage.
Yeah.
Have to get rid of that. These are going to be really irritating to get through as well, these bone wraiths.
Yeah, it just gorgeously protects everything else. I mean, even if this isn't a particularly high damage board, which obviously it isn't, it's still enough to just chip away turn after turn, and the lack of healing becomes very clear. This, however, despite the fact that the secrets obviously did quite a lot of goodness for Bequiet in the early game, this is kind of where I start disliking the secret rogue, is because, you know, it can get these advantages, but then it lacks the ability to actually kill his opponent. No eviscerates in the deck, no nitro boost poison in the deck. If World Kick Rogue was in the position that Bequiet was in right here, it would just lock your opponent out of the game because you kill them so quickly.
Yeah, it'd find a 4. Then we saw it a couple of times yesterday, people just digging with infinite passages, just finding that last eviscerate or whatever.
Yeah.
And like you say, the secret rogue has to just keep going, hunting for things that aren't necessarily there, although...
So many options.
Yeah, I don't know. This is nowhere near over, I guess, is where we're going with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not trying to say that Bequiet is not winning the game. He is currently winning this game of Hearthstone, but he's going to give Xiaobai the time to potentially find that miracle out because of the fact that his overall strategy is a fair bit slower.
Well, 1 thief and Miscreant are 2 of the better cards for finding that damage that Bequiet might need to find to claw his way over the line or to finish off this one position without any accidents, at least. And yeah, that's gone pretty wide.
Yeah, all of a sudden he has in fact found the damage that he will need to be able to close this one down. The Micro Mummy on its own has just been a real menace for Xiaobai. Yeah,
and Bequiet's managed that Micro Mummy quite well. A couple of times he could have played 1 thief and chose to keep the board a little bit more narrow to try and get the buffs onto the Bone Wraith. He has actively, tried to hit the minions where he wants the buffs to go. Obviously, not entirely. The cat's been chilling and just missing the buffs the whole time, but he did stay narrow on purpose, I think, to try and get it onto that 5 health minion.
And as this game rapidly approaches its end, I think one thing that I will say about Bequiet's gameplay is, if nothing else, the lesson to take away here is you do not just go prep Swindle on turn 1 for no reason. I have seen that way too many times on my climb towards Legend where people just throw down, I have prep and Swindle, it costs 0, I may as well play it now. Whereas because he saved the prep in his starting hand, he was able to then go Hanar prep Secret instead, which was undeniably the winning play. Like, everything that's happening now, he knows it as much as we do. as long as he just spends his mana on stuff every turn, he's gonna win this game. He just needed to lock down the board at the start, and he did that by holding on to the prep. It was not a particularly complicated, but just very correct early game.
And now he's just playing obvious mage cards. Like, this isn't a rogue card, Keyboard and Ivory. It's just a card he stole from Mage, I'm pretty sure. There's some dual class cards that I just associate with one class.
Just forget. Yeah, no, I get you there.
Why is this a rogue card all of a sudden?
Yeah, Shield of Honor, absolutely the pick as well. That's that bite that I was talking about. The guarantee that you can close down the game no matter what your opponent does. Yeah, well...
Yeah, good luck.
If there's ever going to be a miracle, it will be through that card.
But yeah, it's not going to happen.
Not this time. Flick, nothing happening on that account. And game one to be quiet. As I said, everything that happened for the vast majority of this game was just the legacy of a very strong early play from Be Quiet. I mean, I liked everything he did in the early game, even as far as not playing the explosive trap on turn 3, I think it was, whereas he could have kept generating more and more secrets. Instead, he played the Micro Mummy, and you saw what the Micro Mummy did this game. It buffed like 5 minions over the course of this game and gave so much extra damage. It was just good, I think, understanding from Be Quiet that you're not supposed to be baited into the massive value that Kanar can give you. While I give him maximum marks for gameplay, I will not give him quite so many marks for understanding that we go to a shot of the players after you win.
It's funny, I've actually had a conversation with Be Quiet before. I've said, hey, you need to, when you get the big moments, brand yourself a bit better. You're a tour stop winner. And he instantly just ignores all of that and just leaves the chair after winning a game of Hearthstone on broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, he's speeding the process up. I would have to imagine taking a quick bathroom break while we prepare for game 2. But a big win for sure for Be Quiet here. It's kind of weird casting one of these series that doesn't rely on just the rest of the wins not really mattering and then Paladin trying to squeak through at the end. Because for Be Quiet, with the Rogue gone, he's left with 2 just pretty good decks, right? Obviously, Highlander Priest, just a strong deck. Very arguably the best deck in the metagame right now. The Galakrond Warlock, however, is a lot more suspicious because while it does function, as we know, very well against Priest specifically, how it's going to do against Zoo Warlock, with the Warrior Band away, it would be Zoo Warlock, Whirl Kick Rogue, Paladin as well. These are decks that can dole out quite a lot of damage, quite a lot of early board control, and I don't know, I have my question marks about Galakrond Warlock. It's not an especially strong deck. It's definitely one of the more targeted lineup strategies that you can go for.
It's interesting, the whole lineup, and I wonder how he put it together. Like you say, it could well just be an anti-deck, but it's not completely off the wall, but it's a lot more off the wall lineup than most things we're seeing. Like, you've got 10 decks to choose from, and he's gone, no, I've got 14 decks to choose from. I'm just going to go that bit wider in the meta than most people have gone.
But quite clearly, it's working out fantastically for him thus far. I would be interested to know how many of his opponents brought the lineup that he was hoping to target. Because, I mean, if you can get this kind of strategy where if you hit the target that you're looking for, you pretty much auto-win. And even if you don't, you're still in a good spot. That's pretty much the dream Conquest lineup that you can construct. For Be Quiet now, though, on the priest, the Highlander priest, going with the nameless one fitted in there, which interestingly enough, even in a deck that runs 30 unique cards, most of the time doesn't break into the top 30 good cards in priest right now. Whereas when it was first announced, I think pretty much unanimously everyone thought this card looks insane.
Yeah, why isn't this card busted, Derek? This card is in the current meta where silence is good and 4/4s for 4 are okay. Why is this just not a completely busted card?
I think it slots into the idea of what you slowly realize about Highlander Priest is it is a deck where you just want to play good cards every turn. You don't want to be faffing about with, control strategies too much. You don't want to have these combo effects that, Priest has traditionally been known for, be it Orkanai Soul Priest plus Circle of Healing way back in the day, or Cabal Shadow Priest plus Wave of Apathy, all these different combos. You just want to play strong cards, and I think most of the time the problem with the Nameless one is it's not that good on turn 4, and any turn after that, you can save it for a silence effect, but most of the time it's just not going to be as insane as you would like it to be. Obviously, if you hit the perfect target, it's one of the most bananas cards you could possibly play in Hearthstone, but most of the time you're not going to get that, and you would rather just play Twilight Drake.
So I'm going to throw this out there. You're saying that you think his lineup might be anti-Priest. I think the Nameless one might be quite good on curve in the mirror. There's Kaj, there's Pyromancers. Okay, they don't necessarily get played on curve. There's Sethex on 2 that get Apotheosis. Maybe you just play it in there if you're targeting Priest to make sure you lock in the mirror, because that's your weak spot.
I buy that argument. I think that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't play it on ladder is kind of the point I'm trying to make. I think you would rather, as I said, just play Twilight Drake if you're looking for another good card to play on the 4-cost slot. But against the Zoo on the other side, this can be an interesting matchup, because another thing that I think you realize fairly quickly with Priest is that against Zoo, which now has gone kind of back to having a lot of buff effects, despite having hardly any of them for a while, with Wriggling Horror and Wicked Whispers being the main culprits here, a lot of your removal in Holy Nova and Breath of the Infinite isn't really big enough to get the job done. So I would like to see from Bequiet the tempo options once again coming down. Sethic Veilweaver, Zephrys, Raised Dead, Draconic Studies, all these cards that allow him to dominate the board, because once they're behind, Zoo really struggles in this meta.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not the old card draws in the old sense of tapping. You never spend 2 mana to tap unless you've lost. You cheat things out with Hand of Gul'dan, obviously, and you get your cards that way. But if Zoo loses the board, it has to take time to recover. Nobody has time. It's not just Zoo. Nobody has time to recover. Apart from maybe Rogue, because they can cheat massively on mana, and maybe Druid, I guess. But yeah, I agree with you, I think. But it's getting there. Can you clear that board? If Zoo just spews a load of minions all over the board, they're big health minions sometimes. They're not that easy to just remove. And as a Highlander deck, I know Priest kind of isn't a Highlander deck in some ways, because there's a lot of cards that do similar things. It can be just difficult to get rid of.
Can indeed. There are a lot of tricks you can do, though. While for the most part, Zoo is just trying to develop the maximum stats every turn, Priest has a lot of tricks up its sleeve that you can go for. Ilusha is deceptively powerful in the matchup. While most of the time against aggro decks, it can kind of struggle to find value because you don't have time to play it. I think against Zoo, because of all the discard effects like Soulfire, Wicked Whispers, as I was talking about, you can just dump their entire hand with very little mana once you play Ilusha in the early game. So there's a lot of tricks that Bequiet can do, and we're going to have to see if he can pull them out of his hat in this match with the Highlander Priest with a decent start already, 2-drop plus Kaj. You maybe keep the Ooze here as well, up against what you're always going to see against Zoo, which is just a bunch of stuff.
But it's an interesting bunch of stuff. It's the stuff you want plus a Neophyte. I'm curious to see which things he throws here. Because Neophyte is probably deceptively not good, because Priest operates with minions far more than Priest ever has. But still, if you dump him Neophyte down on turn 2 to defend your 2 1-drops, and then back it up with a Dark Glare, I can see interesting things happening. But
I like this a lot. This is kind of what I was going to lean up to, which is that these 1-drops are kind of not what you're actually looking for. Like, the only 1-drops that you're really going to keep here are Flame Imp and I guess maybe Tour Guide, given that you have the Dark Glare. But what you want are not 1-drops with Zoo anymore. What you want is Hand of Gul'dan and a way to discard it. That's how you win this matchup against Priest, because with Dark Glare, he's got plenty of mana to work with, make no mistake. He just needs the cards to complement that, which is why I think this is a very smart mulligan from Xiaobai.
Yeah, unfortunately, he sort of drew back into the same hand.
We
might get a good lesson now into why you don't keep that. Apart from when you just gave on top of that, we might get a good lesson into why this doesn't necessarily work. But he did, of course, pick up the Nightshade and the Giant by at least having a go at throwing them away.
And this curve is just going to work out gorgeously from Bequiet. Like, holding onto the ooze, again, it's not a particularly optimistic keep because there are many better cards than ooze in the early game, but it's pretty good. Alongside Kaj, you're likely to be able to go at least toe-to-toe tit for tat with the priest, the zoo in the early game. Sorry,
Yeah,
and that's exactly what's going to happen.
Size, right?
Yeah,
It's just a good shape for a 3-drop for you. Forgetting the fact that obviously it has an ability that is super strong as well. Yep, no spells in hand, unlucky.
it's just basically the strongest development he can do here is the problem, and Bequiet is going to quite happily, I think. Kaj, and then possibly you can even get away with a value trade rather than trading into the neophyte.
I think so. Assuming he Kajas, which I think he does.
Oh yeah, 100%.
This always bothers me.
What does?
Why? Why is there any thought here about the 3-2? Why would a 1-3 ever be better? But obviously, it turns out when you've got nothing else to consider on the turn, you might as well think about what the best play is, just in case there's something you're overlooking. A 1-3 does live longer, I guess. Ooh.
It's one of those top decks that, like, it's good, but it's bad. The giant in hand is just so annoying here because next turn, if that wasn't there, Nightshade Matron, discard Hand of Gul'dan, you're looking absolutely fantastic. But now he has to tap a whole bunch before it's even possible to discard Hand of Gul'dan. He could just tap and take the 50-50 next turn, I suppose, would be a reasonable way to go about it. But it's not the situation that you want to be in at all.
Tells Bequiet a lot as well, the tap into the tour guide there, about the hand he's facing. Like, my opponent did nothing. Why did my opponent do nothing? Well, there's not that many things it can be when that happens in Zoo right now.
I mean, I think you're approaching the point where you do just have to take the 50-50. He's losing so badly on board right now.
Yeah.
A little agony goes on.
Sure, you can take another turn. Oi,
That doesn't
oi,
work
oi.
either.
Disaster. Look at all these bad cards.
That's the problem with with some of the decks that aren't Rogue and Priest. They have bad cards in them at times.
Should just put good cards in instead.
Yeah, just play good cards. Lol.
Because you're playing Wicked Whispers, you can't play that here, right? Surely, like...
He's going to...
Oh! I know that you're losing on board otherwise, but this hand has just gone awful. Losing the Matron, not even being able to cast the Hand of Gul'dan. Like this
all the rules you just gave as to what you're trying to do in this deck against Priest, he's had to throw out of the window just to stay alive.
Oh, I'm physically in pain having to watch this. Like, I mean, I'm still kind of the opinion that he should have just gone tap into Nightshade Matron on
And
that
take
turn.
50, yeah. Well...
Now you're not so behind on board, and if you do miss here, well, I guess you can just play Hand of Gul'dan next turn. Yeah, I think I actually just like jamming it here. Half the time, it's insane, and the other half of the time, it's bad, obviously, but you just play Hand of Gul'dan next turn. He got the bad half.
He got the bad half, but yeah. What's his play otherwise? Like, you're going to tap?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Really? And possibly even miss? Actually, it's almost impossible to miss, but yeah.
Yeah, offensive in a fire, just bring it down to a 2-2. That's very nice here.
Oh my goodness. Well, enjoy your cards.
Do you really not play Hand of Gul'dan here?
come on.
Of course you don't play Hand of Gul'dan. What am I talking about? You just hit the one activator left in your deck, of course. I guess with Soulfire and a 1-cost card, he had a couple more activators there, to be fair. But
It feels like every turn he's had to make really horrible decisions between something that looks really bad and something that looks really badder.
yeah. He's thinking like he should bump first and then raise dead, I think, to get back the Nightshade Matron. I think
Just looking at Bequiet's hand, he hasn't got anything. Like, this
That's
is
true.
quite over because of the, like, weirdness of Bequiet's hand. Xiaobai's probably think he's over, but actually, if Bequiet whiffs once or twice, this could get nasty.
Yeah, he can definitely turn this one around. Like, this card alone, the 5/4, is a pretty big deal, and ooh, that is also a pretty big deal.
Yes, just a bit.
Okay, so now Bequiet gets 2 copies of Hand of Gul'dan into his hand, which, I mean, we were talking about how he's running out of cards, and even though 6 mana draw 3 is not great, I think he would gladly play it here to refill your hand.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal.
I like seeing how tech cards or unused, underutilized cards work out, and so far that's an A+. That worked out really well.
Yeah, that was insane.
Like a 1,000,000 card swing. And now Xiaobai is very much in trouble here. Oh, so I don't know why I say now. He has been since turn 2, but...
Well, obviously wishes he had the Hand of Gul'dan in hand now to discard again. Otherwise, you're looking at, like, discarding Manari Mosha. Obviously, you get 2 of them back, but...
Great.
Yeah. It's all just
Probably
a
how
little
he
too
feels.
slow, and... I mean, he knows he's going to start dying pretty quickly here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is spoken about, I think, with this particular Zoo deck is the amount of damage you deal to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like old-time Zoo where you tap until you hit 10 health and then maybe slow down in case they have burn. Like, you just have to keep damaging yourself in this modern iteration of Zoo just to do what you want to do. And that means you die in 2 hits if things go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it's also worth mentioning that at any point from here on in, Bequiet is a Zephyrus away from just having lethal with the inner fire factored in as well. Like,
You hope.
yeah, well.
Poor Zephyrus.
Ooh. Alusha's interesting. You could go for the tactic of, like, making a board that your hand can't deal with and then swapping to give your opponent your hand. But just taking the card draw instead. Very, very strong play still.
Still just doing the thing you do against Zoo. This is a lesson for people who don't, are new to Hearthstone in particular. Just keep killing Zoo's things and it will go away.
Pretty much. And I think now with the extra card draw, this is very rapidly approaching a lock for Bequiet. The Twin Tyrant is devastatingly strong against anything that Zoo can throw down. You're essentially hoping for the remaining Flesh Giant, I suppose, as the only real chance for Xiaobai, and hoping that it sticks.
Yeah, how is it going to stick with so much card draw available? I mean, it can. You're right. That is what you have to try and do. The art of Hearthstone is to play to your outs is the phrase, but the outs here are out of the door, out of the window, out of the 6-0 bracket.
Yeah, out of time, out of luck.
Well, we could do this all day, but we probably shouldn't.
Or we'll be out of a job.
Absolutely. Of course, assuming that Bequiet does close this one down, it's going to still come down to his Warlock that you were talking about at the start.
Right.
Definitely the problem that he still has to overcome.
Yeah, I wouldn't even go so far as to say the problem. It's just the question mark, because it's not a common deck in the metagame by any stretch of the imagination. You will not see Galakrond Warlock on ladder very much at all. But that's not to say necessarily that it is, a bad deck. The one time I have seen it was when I faced against Yala on ladder, and I absolutely wiped the floor with him, which does not often happen when I match against Yala, which definitely does not give me much hope for Bequiet.
Does that mean that he now has to commentate Grandmasters and you get to play? Is that how that works?
That's how it works. Yeah, he's stolen my power, or I've stolen his.
Wow. Yeah, the other way around. Yeah.
Other way around, I think, would be more apt, yeah. Well, I mean, even so, this is still a strong turn now for Xiaobai. He's been looking for Broom for a while, because that's the only way that you have to swing the board as Zoo. And I mean, now look at the swing that he can make here. Voidwalker, Mosha into Broomstick. He can gain 8 health on this turn and clear the board. It's a strong turn.
Okay.
I don't think it wins the game, But it's a small
No,
turn.
but it's worth seeing for... We've got a lot of Hearthstone coming up today and tomorrow. It's worth seeing, in a slightly closer situation, just how crazy this comeback could be. And it could work here, but I don't think it will. And I'm amazed that Zoo still has this in it after how badly it's gone for it so far. But here's the problem, is Priest has had the advantage for so long, where it's been trading and sort of trading one for one, it's been building up this massive hand. Just a random 3-2 Lazul for no card. Random ooze for no kill.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see it often, but this is absolutely correct for Bequiet. You just put the pressure on the Zoo. They've had one broomstick. They need another to have any chance here. Can Rathad into Broom, and then maybe he can stay alive for that turn? But again, I still don't think that he's going to be winning the game, because even if Bequiet doesn't have the cards he needs to win the game, he could just play that second hand of Gul'dan.
Also notice that because of what Bequiet did, Xiaobai kind of can't tap. He has to, but now he's facing down lethal. Oh, there you go. But that would be deliberate for Bequiet. That would be part of his process of, okay, the tap puts lethal on the board. All these little things that we don't highlight that often because they're just doing it every turn.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially, you can just concede now for Xiaobai. I think, well, I mean, he shouldn't. He can very happily keep chugging along, even though he knows in his heart of hearts this is all but over now with any kind of a hand that Bequiet can have.
Yeah, he's going to have a testing year ahead, though, Xiaobai. He's going to be in that Chinese league, which I assume at least, which is pretty punishing from a viewership point of view. Yeah, the Chinese fans like their teams to win, so getting as much time on this broadcast as he possibly can is a nice introduction to that. So definitely don't concede, is my point.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And I'm obviously not trying to advocate that he should. You should play in whatever fashion you deem fit with the cards.
But in particular, I think I'd recommend it to most people. If you find yourself in your first Masters Tour broadcast, just keep playing the game.
Yeah.
As long as you can. Every minute of airtime just relaxes you that little tiny bit more, even if you are getting battered by a Priest.
I mean, I definitely would not have structured the turn this way from Bequiet. I would have just slammed Twin Tyrant after taking a few trades and then won the game that way, but he's winning the game a different way. Psych Split was a tremendous card to have found.
Yeah, I kind of sort of tuned out. As soon as it became obvious he was clearing the board somehow, my brain went, okay, I don't care what the best player is, which is wrong. It's my job to know what the best player is, but yeah. I'm going to hit you for 26 is always a good enough play in my book.
Indeed, and even if he taps into Giant now, it's not going to be enough to clear the board. Bequiet gets us up 2-0 here. One of the quicker series that we've had, even with that game dragging on a little bit before the lethal was found. And overall, Bequiet's off-the-wall lineup with Highlander Mage, a deck I hadn't heard much about before the tournament, at least in terms of saying that they would bring it. I'd obviously heard of Highlander Mage beforehand. And the Galakrond Warlock as well, a deck that I haven't seen played very much at all for a long time now. It's looking great. These are just strong matchups for him. He's drawing the good cards. But now he's got Rogue and Priest out of the way. Those are the two most standard parts. The Mage has been banned, and it's just the Warlock left. One game needing to be won with the Galakrond Warlock. Obviously, he's favored at this point. But the real question is, by how much? Because, if you're not finding the matchups you want, Galakrond Warlock is not a very good deck. I think you could solidly put it at tier 3 at the moment. But I would struggle to put it any higher than that.
And we live in a world where tier 3 is like the old school tier 79 or something, because there's tier inflation across the board.
Sure.
Like S+++ is now quite a good deck. But yeah, one of the things in a tournament though where the meta is this wide and this many decks exist, it does make me wonder how many people haven't had the chance to... you look at this Warlock deck and you go, I'm not playtesting against that, I won't face it. It's a very old school tactic. Bring decks that people haven't tested against. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it really does. I think that in the people that I was talking to in the practice groups I was a part of, it feels like they prepared a lot of decks for themselves more so than they prepared a lot for what their opponent might bring. Because the sensible thing to do is prepare against what most people are going to bring. What is the most standard lineup going to be? But in a way, if you play every deck because you want to test every deck for your own strategy, you kind of get a good idea of how to play against it. So either way, as long as you've done your prep, I think even weird decks like Highlander, Mage, and Galakrond, Warlock, you should be able to understand how to deal with them.
Roughly though, like there is a lot of nuance in those decks, and if you've played, let's say Bequiet made the decision a month ago to play this deck, and all he's done is jam it in playtesting for a month. That's a big edge. I'm not saying that's what he did. I have no idea, but it's a big edge to have. I know that people are banning jump-based Shaman, for instance, presumably because who's playtested against Shaman for more than 5 minutes?
Very true.
But here it is. We're going to get a view of this first hand. And I'm just going to see how many corrupts I can miss, to be honest.
Yeah, the biggest change that we've seen with this Galakrond Warlock from its previous iterations to here is the complete gutting of the Dragon package. We no longer see Moargs, Nether Breaths, Crazed Nether Wings. All the Dragon part of the deck has just been completely taken out, which... you know, I think it's fine because obviously it's found way for stronger cards. I think we can agree overall with the Soul Fragment package and all the new cards like Lucky Soul Hoarder, which is especially powerful in this deck. But it does mean that your healing is quite a bit more limited, at least in terms of burst healing here for the Galakrond Warlock. You know, you have consistent chip healing, I suppose you could say, with all the Soul Fragments that you're going to draw, but you can't heal for 16 or 30 health in a single turn as you could with Moargs and Nether Breaths previously.
Chip healing is a phrase I don't believe I've ever heard, but it sums it up really, really well. I like it. But also, it's like a curve removal deck as well. If you're going to go with chip healing, you kind of have to match your removal on curve to their threats, otherwise things will fall apart quite quickly. I'm curious to see how good Vol'jin turns out to be in this deck. I imagine it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Vol'jin is just quite decidedly, I think we can already see, a good card. It doesn't have to do anything especially powerful for it to be good. Especially against Rogue, where, you know, if they make one big minion, most of their hand is 1, 2, 3 drops. And so if they make a big questing, a big Edwin, you just sap it back to hand and pull out, you know, a Lackey or a Wand Thief or something else from the hand. So I think it'll be very, very powerful here. First of all, though, before we get to the Rogue, before we get to the Paladin, once again, Xiaobai is lining up the zoo here. And while this is Warlock on Warlock, 2 more different archetypes, I think there could not be.
Keeps the Dark Skies. I was wondering if he would or would not. The intention, obviously, to get the big hand, but that can be a very, very costly health exercise doing that against Zoo, who, with their 3 health minions, Dark Skies is really hard push to clear over the whole board a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good recognition for the most part that against Zoo, you're not trying to protect your health total, you're trying to stop their board. That's all. I mean, traditionally, that's all you've ever really had to do against Zoo, and this hand looks pretty well equipped to do that for Bequiet. School Spirits, although it's not likely to be able to clear off the board on its own, given that most minions have like 3 health or they can be buffed with Wicked Whispers, it's still a very welcome sight.
Bit of a tangled mess to unwrap here. Yep. This always feels so weird to me, even to this day. Like, right the way back to the handlock days, this feels weird, but it's definitely correct. It's like, okay, I'm just going to rope-a-dope. You put all your stuff down, I'm just going to sit there drawing cards. How much do you want to do to me before I'm willing to start clearing it up?
I do kind of like that we are seeing Galakrond Warlock, though, because you do start to realize that, like, straight up, there are just some strong cards in Warlock. Cascading Disaster is just really strong. It's fairly easy to corrupt. Destroying all those big minions is nice against the Giants, against Canrathad, if that's what is going to be played later on in the game as well. I think the really interesting one, for me at least, is that Hysteria hasn't found a place in Warlock. Because again, for me, that is absolutely one of those class cards that you were talking about, where it feels like a 100% Priest card, but it is dual class between Priest and Warlock. I guess maybe hinting to the fact that Warlock very often relies on being ahead on board, even in this Galakrond version. And so maybe destroying your own board isn't what you're trying to do.
I guess, but it does feel like a super removal spell.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, we're not seeing this in its happiest positioning. It's taking on decks it doesn't want to be taking on right now.
True. Yeah, that's true. Maybe the fact that you're trying to target Priest means that Hysteria isn't quite worth it most of the time.
But like you say, it feels like a really good card. And you talked about Cascading Disaster. Like, that's the most Yarla card ever. If we don't see him play that at some point in GM, I will be absolutely astounded. It's a combination of awkwardness and value. It's just how Yarla has played the whole of Grandmasters.
Quite right. Okay, well, Xiaobai, despite playing a board that is entirely 1 and 2 health here, I think would usually be fairly happy about it. He's just seen School Spirits. There's not much that can answer this, but Dark Skies, I think you're very, very happy to just throw down here.
Turn 4 Giant. Kind of where you want to be, and he's got another one coming.
He does. This first one, obviously, very easy with just the cascading, even in its fully uncorrupted form. The second one, though, and then Canrathad that's able to come down on turn 8, that may be a little bit more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I might have to see some Silas play.
Perhaps, yeah.
Press the right direction in the same way that I never do.
Okay, that is a Ticketus in uncorrupted form. Militia gone. School Spirits for more card removal. Cascading Disaster. A lot of the strong cards in the deck destroyed there by Ticketus.
Yeah, Ticketus haters are probably rejoicing right now watching that happen. It's like, yeah, this is the Ticketus we want to see, where it just scores own goals.
And, I mean, while it was pretty brutal to see those cards go, it was still the play, 100% for Bequiet. If you can play your own 8/8 to try and fight back against what's on the other side, you most certainly do it. But it's not necessarily quite so clear what you do now, because you do have the line of Nightshade, Broomstick, Wicked Whispers to, obviously you get rid of Canrathad and that line is the downside, but it would allow the Matron and the Broom when buffed up to trade into Ticketus, and then you have a 9/9 that you can swing face with on the same turn.
Yep.
And it's pretty much going all in on the fact that they don't have an answer to your 9/9.
And all the time trying to make it so you position correctly against Silas, which he's trying absolutely to do, by the way.
That's true. That's true.
This 9/9 being in the middle is a very careful nod to that. That's part of what ate up his time there. I think he's just making sure that you can't play on Silas that well, but making sure you do the most you can against him.
Yeah, it does mean in the end, though, that with the trade and correct... Oh no, incorrect positioning from Bequiet. That was wrong. He put it on the wrong side, right?
Yes.
Am I missing something? He could have given us Silas there, right?
Silas scares me at the best of times.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe it's correct. Maybe he wants the 4 health.
What? I'm pretty sure it was not correct rather than correct there, but either way. Yeah, I mean, because of the fact that it had Rush, at least, it's not a disaster. He's still in a pretty good spot this game. And he's able to go with the Devoted Maniac, keep these Invokes rolling, massively ahead on board. And with one final hurrah here for Xiaobai, he's really just hoping that this can pull him back in this game by summoning a few demons. But it definitely doesn't look at the moment like that's going to be enough. Oh yeah, wait, he gets the 8/8 Ticketus back. Man, a lot went wrong with that play from Bequiet. There are rippling effects even now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's made everything really awkward, this 8/8 suddenly being around. Slight shake of the head there from Bequiet as well, so you're definitely right. I thought you might be, but you definitely are.
I mean, I've been wrong before. It's just the lack of reaction from him. I would expect an almost respectful, oh, I'm an idiot at that point. But either way, Plague of Death or Plague of Flames off the top is a gorgeous way here to clear up the board, develop your tempo. Slamming down Kronks or Ogremancer, it really doesn't matter here. All is more than good enough to just close out the game in the next couple of turns.
And done it pretty much without ever attacking face.
That's kind of true, yeah.
Very solid looking performance. Okay, definitely something went a bit weird in the middle there, but it's going to be a fairly comfortable 3-0, really, from start to finish.
Just dominant right from the get-go. I mean, Xiaobai Zhu was looking very weak. And Bequiet, you know, make no mistake, had 3 very good draws, one after the other. The Rogue with the secret package, being able to activate that Hanar right from the get-go. Priest just curved out from start to finish and dominated the board. And even this Warlock here, it had all the answers you could possibly want against a Zoo board, no matter how wide it goes. But that's the way it be sometime. He goes up now to, you would have to imagine, even with Broomstick off the top, 7-0 in the Swifts from Bequiet. As you were saying, it's a couple of years ago at this point, but his dominance to be the first player to ever win a Masters Tour when that was the system in 2018, kicked the year off in a fantastic fashion. And while he hasn't been able to follow up quite so strongly as that one result, this could now be his opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I'd love to see him do it as well. He's played solid, and once again, Paladin to me is the talking point. This time, the lack of and how strong it felt not having to play it. Like, maybe if he'd had equivalent draws with Paladin that he had with these decks, we'd be talking about how amazing Paladin was as well, but it felt nice not having to bring a Paladin out.
It really did. Nicely done by Bequiet as well. I mean, you know, like I said, he had the draws that game, but I think aside from that one blip with Silas, that again, I'm pretty sure was just wrong. Aside from that, it was a very, very strong series altogether. He knew exactly what you're looking to do in all the matchups. The keeps, I think, for the most part, were absolutely spot on. So clearly well practiced, even in this lineup full of weird decks. And well, my heart goes out for Xiaobai, as you were saying, with KZG's entrance into the Chinese Team League to be played out later this year. A 6-1 scoreline is still a very impressive start.
Yeah, his career's over now.
Right, yeah.
What a load of rubbish, right?
Wrap it up. But he's still very much in the running to go through to the top 16, especially because he got all his wins at the start, making his tiebreakers that little bit juicier as well. But for Bequiet, only 2 rounds left to go today for him, and he's looking like a prime contender to already be through to the top 16.
And we will see the start of that top 16 at the end of the broadcast as well, before going into the top 8 tomorrow. So we'll get the Swiss done, and then we will have a look at the knockout stages.
We will indeed.
Shaping up to be a very strong one as well. A lot of the Grandmasters weren't necessarily placed exactly in the top 16 at the start of the broadcast, but they're all up there on good scores. All the big names are hanging around on 4-1 at the start of the day. So we'll see some of those guys pop into there later on for absolute sure.
Yeah, a lot of the guys that I was talking to